And so, it continues. Hello there, friend. Welcome back to the next installment of my ongoing 2016 Finish It Challenge. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with my Finish It Challenge, at the start of 2016 I told myself, you know what, Max, you don't finish things very often, so let's make 2016 the year about finishing things. And I've been finishing books, finishing games, finishing shows and anime, and last week I finally reviewed Bird by Bird, a really good book on writing advice that I've been meaning to read for years, and this week I finished another book, though completely unrelated to writing advice. This week I'm reviewing Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp. Is the Force strong with this one? Let's find out. So, let's take it from the top. What is this book actually about? Lords of the Sith is one of the new Expanded Universe books. Since The Great Purge a few months back, where all of the old Expanded Universe books became non-canon, they released a bunch of new ones, and this book is really effective. And right off the bat it tells you, because there's like a little infographic at the start of the book that tells you, hey, this new book takes place between episode 3 and episode 4, and it follows the point of view of several characters, a group of Twi'lek revolutionaries, as well as a group of Imperial generals, and of course, it features Darth Vader and the Emperor. Now, I would love to say that this book is basically Darth Vader and the Emperor going on a road trip, but that would be kind of like an injustice to this book, because there's way more to that. The other players, the big players in this book get the moment in the spotlight. As much as I want to say this book is about Darth Vader and the Emperor, it's kind of not. They're like 40% of the book, while the other 60% are like the members of the Empire and the Twi'lek revolutionaries trying to start up trouble and basically attempt to murder the Emperor and Darth Vader in one fell swoop. Or rather, like 3 fell swoops, but that's getting into the plot of the story. At its core, this is a story about a group of people trying to take down a foe much greater than themselves. Now, before I move on into the good, the bad, and the award for this particular book, I have to make it very clear that I don't particularly consider myself the biggest Star Wars fan. I'm a giant nerd. But anyhow, I've taken like 5 selfies of me kissing Phasma. Is that a metaphor for something? I thought I had deleted that clip. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. My interest in Star Wars was revived when I watched The Force Awakens. I hadn't been that excited to see Star Wars in decades. So when I came out of the theater, I was like, I want more Star Wars in my life right now, and a bunch of recommendations came in, and the one that interested me the most was Lords of the Sith. Mostly because throughout the movies and a few of the extra Expanded Universe things that I had seen, you don't get to see a lot of Darth Vader's point of view, and I wanted to see that. And I got plenty of that. People argue that there was nowhere near enough for a book titled Lords of the Sith. Well, the book should have really be titled Vader and the Emperor Trump a Revolution, but that's besides the point. All I'm saying here is that I'm not the biggest fan. I didn't read all the Expanded Universe stuff. My point of view right now is based on this book as its own individual within the Star Wars timeline. So with that being said, what were the good things? What were the things that I enjoyed about this book? Well, first off, I know that I joked about this. But this book, the second half of it is basically Darth Vader and the Emperor going on a road trip, and that was, for me at least, super enjoyable. You almost seldom got to see Darth Vader and the Emperor hanging out together and just talking, and getting them to hang out and talk was, for me, super interesting and exciting. I know, and I read reviews, and I saw other people's points of view, and a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like seeing the Emperor talking and acting like a human being. I particularly enjoyed that. And every time, people forget that words mean a lot. And I enjoyed whenever the Emperor would address Vader, it wouldn't be like, apprentice, low one, young one. It would be Lord Vader. It showed this sense of respect. Because if you know the rule of 2, you understand why they're really close and yet really far away, because the Emperor's task is to train Vader until Vader is badass enough to kill him. And I hated the rule of 2, and this book made the rule of 2 a little bit more understandable, because you get chapters from the point of view of Vader, and I will talk more about Vader being awesome. But for now, one of the things that I enjoyed the most about this book was seeing the Emperor and Darth Vader talking and hanging out. That is so cool. Primarily, and to some people this was a negative, I understand, but to me it was a positive, seeing this person who the Emperor, who in the original trilogy is basically a vampire. He's basically a hooded vampire who has no feelings and emotions. And seeing him talk to Vader and ask him about his feelings is kind of awesome and interesting. I love that. I love when this character is basically removed from just being a stereotypical hooded vampire. Now, I've gone on way too long. What other thing I liked? I love that you see Darth Vader's point of view. Again, some people out there dislike that he actually looks back on his life and the things that shaped him. I like that he explains how he uses the Force. He explains that the way in which he focuses himself, the way in which he enters the Force through meditation is through anger, the bad things that happened to him, which kind of explains why he's such a bitter person, because at this point, he's like in his late 30s. He's in his late 30s, he's been in this suit for like 10 years, and every time he has to go into battle, he has to remind himself of all the bad things that happened to him, because that's how he enters the Force. That's awesome, that's amazing, and the opening scene of this story, which is Vader just meditating, is on point. No, I'm fangirling. Other thing that I really liked, the rest of the cast, which are basically like 60% of their story, the Twilight Revolutionaries, the Imperial Peoples, they're all well written, on point. You learn their motives throughout the story. This is like a really solid book because it doesn't have a lot of flaws. It's not like the greatest book out there filled with many insightful things. It's just a really fun journey, and particularly, there are a couple of characters, and before I go, because I know I can, before I go on into an enormous tirade about how I loved everyone, especially some of the side character dorks in the Twilight Revolution people, there was one character, don't mind my dramatic hair flip, there was one character, and for those of you who have read the book, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's Moff Morse. Moff Morse, I hated her, I despised her, until we got to see her point of view. And when we got to see her point of view, I flipped. I immediately flipped because I realized that all of the times we saw her before were through the point of view of somebody who hated her, who despised her. And through that way, we basically, as the reader, learned that as the truth. So when we finally got to meet her and understood how she got there, I flipped. I completely flipped. And I was like, oh God, I wanted you to die. Like 3 times I was like, this is where she bites it. Right here. She dies right here. And it was a really nice flip. And I know that I fangirl a lot about Vader and the Emperor because I really did enjoy their silly interplay. But the other characters were all on point. This is not like a grand book, but it's a really solid book with a lot of fun characters and a really, really solid story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Now, calm down. I'm not giving you my closing thoughts just yet. We still have to talk about the bad things, the things that I did not particularly like in this book. Okay, right off the bat, first off, on the subject of things I didn't like, I'm gonna take the one petty thing off the list right away. There are no typos in this book. Thank heavens. Have you read Aftermath? There are no typos in this book. There is one inconsistency though. There's one inconsistency, and I must blame the editor for this, or the writer as well, because he should have also cut it as well. There's one moment in the story, and it's nothing. It's seriously nothing, but it's one of those things where, like, if you don't want numbers to bite you in the butt, don't mention numbers. Because there's one scene at like the 75% mark of the book where the royal guards that are following the Emperor, like, switch numbers, because, like, there are 3, then there's 2, then there's 3 again, then there's 2 again, and I'm like, I know this is petty, but I'm like, just don't mention numbers if you don't want to have a problem like this. Now, with that pettiness out of the way, what is my biggest complaint with this book? The biggest complaint that I have is not like a mega complaint, but it's one of those things where this book takes place in the past. It takes place between episode 3 and episode 4. What does that mean? Well, it means that no matter what happens, Vader and the Emperor can't die, because it's part of the timeline, where that's the problem with doing books in the past, because there is no surprise. I know, as the reader, that Vader and the Emperor are going to win. They're going to win at the end, and that creates a sort of morbid sense of humor, I guess, where you're just sitting, reading the book, reading about these people, like, trying their darnest, doing their best, making sacrifices, watching their friends die, trying to destroy this enormous foe, and you know they're not gonna win. So it's a little bit morbid in that regard, and there were times where I was like, oh my god, like, this is it, they have nowhere else to go, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know the future. I have seen what comes next. They have to get out of this somehow. I don't want to make that a big complaint because I knew coming in, because, you know, this takes place in the past, they couldn't die. That timeline makes no sense. So I understand it's not a big complaint, but it's one of those things where, like, I kept pulling myself out of the story because I was realizing that I was morbidly enjoying seeing these people fail. And the other thing that I did not particularly enjoy about the story, and it's another small complaint, but the final scene of the book is really cool. It has like the best like Emperor Palpatine just drops the mic sort of moment. It's cool. I would have rather had like 5 more pages learning a little bit more about what happened to the other members of the cast. I don't want to say that it just fades to black, but we have a very like I don't want to say harsh, but just harsh cut. And it's nice, it's effective. That final line is really good. I would have preferred having that line at the end of 5 pages of, you know, here's a little bit more about all those characters that you learned and loved and all the ones that survived. Here's a little bit more on them. I would have preferred that. Now, I understand writing, I understand books, sometimes the story ends where it ends, that's fine. I don't particularly think it's an enormous complaint. Take it as a positive or negative, that I enjoyed the characters enough where I was like, give me more, please don't end it right here, I gotta know what happens to them next. And with that plea of mercy out of the way, let's take a moment to talk about the award. Every episode I like to give this book, this game, this anime, this show, an award to represent, encapsulate a little bit of how I felt about them, and I have to, from the bottom of my heart, I gotta give Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp, I gotta give them, without a doubt, the But the Future Refused to Change award. And there's a Chrono Trigger reference for you, but silliness out of the way, I understand that I had a little bit of a complaint. I had a complaint about understanding that no matter what people did, the Emperor and Darth Vader were not going to die. They could fail, but they could not die. I understand that that's what happens when you have a story set in the past, and I get that. That's why to me, the idea of futility kind of became the central theme to this story, because you have these people who are, for all intents and purposes, and by the way, we're going into my final closing thoughts right now. You have these people who are, for all intents and purposes, they are super low-level characters. They are low-level characters, and they want to go up against the final boss. It's a fun story, and it's filled with really interesting characters, and I think that's exactly what intrigues you as the reader, because you know they're going to fail. They have got to fail, or at least they are going to not be able to kill the Emperor and Darth Vader, but at the same time you want them to succeed, you want them to see where it goes, because they give it a really good freaking attempt. And if you're at all interested in Star Wars, I would honestly recommend picking this up. I have to agree with the complaints that this book is not what it claims to be. This is not gonna tell you a lot about the Sith. You are gonna learn 2 Sith words throughout the entirety of this book. But other than that, I think this book could have had a better name. Darth Vader and the Emperor go on a road trip, that's a pretty good one. But overall, I definitely enjoyed my time with this book. I actually did, and especially coming after The Force Awakens and wanting to get more Star Wars stuff. And I hope you understand, it's a little bit weird for me to fully recommend this book to everyone, because it's kind of niche. It's a Star Wars story set in the past between 3 and 4. It's really niche, but it's a really fun, compact book. It's a nice, fun journey. And coming off of me reading like really personal stuff like Bird by Bird and really dark stuff like 1984, Lords of the Sith was actually kind of a lighthearted, not really lighthearted because there's plenty of death, but coming off of those things I was like, this is a nice fun journey. It's action-packed, it's got interesting characters, some of which will surprise you. At the end of it all, I was like, this was nice. It wasn't like the greatest journey of all time, but it was definitely worth the price of admission. So with that being said, if you would like to enjoy a story about Darth Vader and the Emperor being totally best buddies hanging out in space, and you would also like to see a story about the futility of low-level characters going up against the final boss, I recommend Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp. And as always, if you would be interested in maybe checking out this book, there should be a link to it in the description down below. And one more thing before you go. If you would like to know what I'm going to be reviewing next week, what mystery item I'm going to be reviewing next week, check out the link in the description down below and get a little bit of an insight into what's coming down the channel relatively soon. And of course, as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, it means a lot, and leave your comments down below if you have thoughts or feedback, or you read this book as well and you would like to tell me what you thought of it. Did you like Darth Vader and the Emperor hanging out? What were your thoughts on Moff Morse? That name tripped me up every time, I'm not gonna lie to you. Then let me know down in the comments down below. For the time being, thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and make 2016 the year about finishing things. Okay? Okay.